Welcome to this session. My name is Angel Borroy and I'm working as developer evangelist and open source advocate in Hyland. We are talking today about open source content service platforms and how to deploy them by using containers. Hyland is providing different products related with document and content management, and this catalog includes both Alfresco and Nuxeo platforms as the main open source alternatives in this market. Deploying Alfresco and Nuxeo with Docker Compose is the recommended approach for testing or evaluation purposes and for small installation. After this session, you will be able to understand the different components of the products, and you will learn how to deploy them all together. Our agenda starts with a small journey from ECM, Enterprise Content Management, to CSP, Content Service Platform concepts. Since this market, content and document management, is including the same products from the 90s, understanding the changes that happened in that period would help to identify what requirements are covered by them. The next section will be focused on the Alfresco platform that is provided using LGPL v3 license. And after that, we'll move our focus to Nuxeo product that is provided using an Apache v20 license. On the final part, some time is reserved to describe the Hyland open source vision for the next years. But let's get started now with that ECM to CSP transition. Enterprise content management market has been present from 1990. Since Hyland was the first company founded in 1991, Nuxeo and Alfresco were also founded in the early 2000s. Hyland developed proprietary products, while both Nuxeo and Alfresco decided to release open source products with Apache license v20 for Nuxeo and LGPL v3 license for Alfresco. Back in 2017, some analysts like Gartner reevaluated the goals of this marketplace, and a new term was introduced: Content Service Platforms, CSP, that are more focused on content services, repositories, APIs, and solutions. Since this new definition didn't affect the essence of the products, some changes were introduced in the roadmap of the platforms in order to cover that new requirements described by the CSP concept. On the other side, Hyland acquired the existing open source platforms Alfresco and Nuxeo in the last 2 years, with the goal to consolidate the position of these products in the market, but also founding a new Hyland Experience platform, HXP, that will be delivering the future of the CSP experience in the next year. Another relevant topic introduced by Forrester in 2014 is the low-code approach. After that, developing experience with content service platforms was classified in 4 different levels. The core SDK for trained developers that allows inner customizations in the product, the public APIs for developers with the ability to integrate CSP with other platforms easily, the low code for DevOps and administrators, focus on an easier customization of the product, and even the no-code level that leverages the ability of citizen developers to add new features in the platform. While Alfresco is more oriented to provide development frameworks to users in the 3 inner layers, Nuxeo is more oriented to adopt the low-code and no-code paradigm. This is a relevant difference that will be analyzed later in this video. We are covering some aspects about the Alfresco open source platform before moving on to the Docker Compose deployment. Remember that Alfresco is licensed as LGPL v3, so you may need to check license conditions before modifying or distributing the original source. Alfresco community provides some resources that will be helpful to explore. All the source code is available in Alfresco GitHub account. There is a public Maven repository for Java artifacts and deployments that can be accessed in nexus.alfresco.com. There is a nice community collaboration site that we name Alfresco Hub in hub.alfresco.com. This site includes a forum, blog posts, add-ons, marketplace, and some other content built by the community. The official documentation, also available in Alfresco GitHub account to accept your suggestions as pull request, includes detailed instructions for a lot of different operations in the platform. Finally, the Alfresco Discord channel is the common place to have a technical chat or to catch up with the product features. When looking at the Alfresco platform, some different components or services can be found. The repository that includes all the core service of the platform is connected to some other services like the transfer service to provide document format transformations, the search service supporting the indexing and searching processes, and the messaging service that handles asynchronous messages in the platform. The content is stored in a file storage, that is a file system for the documents, and the data storage, that is the database for the metadata. Also, some UI applications delivering the features to the users can be connected to that core repository. On a typical deployment, a web reverse proxy is used as frontend to handle external requests to the different Alfresco features. Did you notice that every Alfresco service is relying on open source products? The repository that is mainly built in Java and Spring Framework is deployed in Apache Tomcat. The transfer service uses a bundle of different open source projects like LibreOffice, Apache Tika, and ImageMagick to get the format transformations done. Service is a wrapper of Apache Solr, while the messaging service is built around Apache ActiveMQ. Commonly, Alfresco is deployed using PostgreSQL, but other open source databases like MariaDB are also supported. The UI is built on top of Angular, while there is a legacy UI that uses FreeMarker and a nice framework named SprintServe. Finally, Nginx is used to provide reverse proxy services, but also some other products like Apache HTTPD can be used. Once we learn about the open source resources and the services available in Alfresco, let's move to the Docker Compose deployment. In this case, a community project named Alfresco Docker Installer will be used. Remember that by default, Alfresco new deployments are using admin credentials. This project is a geoman generator that produces a Docker Compose template according to some options chosen by the user. But let's take a closer look into it now. Okay, so let's start with the Alfresco deployment by using Docker Compose. Alfresco has different deployment options. On the official Alfresco documentation, you can find the install section, and you can see the different options. The first one is installing with zip files, so you can install by your own Tomcat and all the infrastructure, and then you can deploy the different Alfresco services manually. You can also can do that manually with Ansible. So we have an Ansible method that allows you to deploy on-premise also Alfresco by using these zip distribution files. And the latest option is to use Docker images. And for this kind of deployment, we have the Docker Compose approach. That is the one we are going to use now. And also you can use Helm charts in order to deploy that in a Kubernetes cluster. But you have all the information to deploy the platform in the official Alfresco documentation, but let's focus on the Docker Compose deployment. So for that, Alfresco is providing on this project, on this ACS deployment project, is providing a simple community Docker Compose that is including Alfresco with some default configuration. But in this case, we are going to use the Alfresco Docker installer project that is also available in the Alfresco GitHub account. And this project is a Geoman generator for Alfresco. So it has some requirements in your computer that you need to have installed Node.js and also Geoman. So just install Geoman with Node.js, and after that you can install the Alfresco Docker installer generator. Obviously, you also require Docker and Docker Compose in order to run the Docker Compose template produced by this project. Since I have all the dependencies installed on my laptop, I'm going to use the project with Joe Alfresco Docker installer. And I'm going to choose the options I want for this specific deployment. So we are supporting with this project versions of the product from 6.1 to 7.1. We are going to choose the latest one this time. Alfresco requires around 16 gigabytes of RAM in order to deploy all the different services. If you are skipping some service, then you can use less than that. But we are going with default again. And for the web proxy, remember that we were exposing only the services by using a web proxy based in Nginx. You can use plain HTTP or HTTPS TLS v12. But in this case, this is a local demo, and again, we are going to go with the default HTTP connecting. The name of the server, used also for the proxy, and the default password for the admin user that we are going to leave as is. And also we have the HTTP port that we are exposing. By default is 80, but we are going to use 8080. That is the traditional port we are using for testing and evaluating Alfresco. We can also add some additional services like or protocols like the FTP protocol that we are not going to use at this demonstration. And we are able also to use some alternative database like MariaDB. And again, we are going to use PostgreSQL, the default option. If you are using Alfresco on a multi-language environment, for instance, if your users are creating content in different languages, for instance, you have like English content, but your users are using Spanish language for the browser. This is a common use case. Then you need to apply this option. With that, Solar is handling all these different locales for the content. So we are going to use that. And the next one is related with Alfresco and Solar communication, with the communication between the repository and Solar. Solar is indexing all the information, all the metadata, and all the content that is stored in Alfresco, and there is a communication between both services. So you can use plain HTTP, we are going to use that, but you can protect this communication by using HTTPS, TLS with mutual authentication, or you can use secret, and secret means that you are sending a secret word in a specific HTTP header. Since again, this is a demo, we are going to go with plain HTTP. And if you are using the ActiveMQ, you are using the Events API, then probably you want to protect the ActiveMQ broker. So if that is the case, just include your credentials for the ActiveMQ at this point. Some additional services like the SMTP server in order to send some emails and notifications to the users that we are not going to use. And in this case, Alfresco can supporting different authentication options. LDAP or Active Directory is one of the most used, but we are not going to use that for the demo. So we are going with default user password stored in the database. And this option is related with the add-ons. Remember that it's the plugins in Alfresco. So this is a small list of alternatives that you may use. There is more alternatives in the Alfresco hub. Remember, hub.alfresco.com. So you can explore that page in order to find your add-on, the add-on that is filling some feature that is not provided by the product by default. But again, we are not going to install any add-on for this deployment. If you are using a Windows host for your deployment, just choose this option, because we are using local volumes for the deployment, and Windows is not handling that easily. So probably you can go with default Docker volumes. It should be something like creating less pain in your deployment if you are using Windows as host. And finally, we have a small starting script in order to control that all the services are deployed in the right way. So with that, we are creating some files in this directory that includes all the configuration for your Docker Compose template. So we have the environment variables for Docker Compose, the Docker Compose itself. We have the Alfresco Docker file. So we are customizing default Alfresco Docker image. We have these two folders that are used in order to deploy some add-ons to the Alfresco repository. You can use AMP, that is the legacy packaging format for deploying add-ons, or the new one that is based in the standard JAR certificate. We are also deploying the legacy UI, the share application, with some customizations, and also with the folders to deploy add-ons. We are deploying also certs with a specific configuration in that Docker file, extending again the foul Docker image from Alfresco, and some configuration for the engine's web proxy. But let's start now this composition. And while this is starting, okay, so with that is building Docker images and so on. So with that, we can explore all the configuration that have been created in that Docker Compose. So this is the file that has been produced with that Geoman project, and we have the Alfresco service with some options, with a main limit depending on Postgres, some default configuration, and all the links to the other services, to the database, to the Solar service, searching service, and so on. We have also some local volumes to store the data. Remember that in this case, Alfresco repository is storing data in the database, but also in a file system in order to store all the different files. We have also the transform service, and this transform service is gathering together all the different LibreOffice, Apache Tika, and this kind of transformers inside. This is a project that holds everything together. This is the legacy UI, and this legacy UI is also connecting with the Alfresco repository. We have the database, and the database also is persisting the volumes. So we are using volumes for this configuration, so you can restart Docker and have your data on it. We have Solar. Solar is the shared services. We are using Solar 6.6 for that, with some links to Alfresco, and also persisting the indexes in the local folder. The next one is ActiveMQ. This is the messaging services, and we are exposing also the admin web UI if you want just to check the browser and to check the different topics and queues. So you can do that. We have also the content application, that is the new UI, the one based in Angular. And finally, we have this web proxy that is wrapping all the connections to the Alfresco share services, share, and the content application with some configuration and some password in order to protect the access to the services. This is only used for the Solar web UI because all the other services are handling the configuration with the Alfresco authentication mechanism. And everything is exposed by using the port 88. So with that, we have all the configuration in place. We have all the volumes storing the different information that we are handling in Alfresco. And if that started fine, and it looks like we have that up and running, we can just explore the different applications that Alfresco is providing by default. So let's start with this one, that is the UI. So this is the Angular UI, the content applications. So you can see all the different options from the Alfresco repository. Probably you can just access a site, preview some file, and the applications on the transform service is now providing a transformation for the budget Excel file. So we have this, and you can just type finding for budget. So the services is providing these results. So everything seems to be working fine. You can also check the repository. The repository application. This repository application provides you some information relative to the different services that are provided with the platform. You have a reference to the online documentation, the legacy UI, Alfresco Share. You can also use Alfresco by using the web dApp protocol. This is the legacy REST API. We have a new API that we are going to see just right now. But this is the legacy API, and this is the new API. You can see this REST API that is based in Swagger. This is a Swagger web page with the different APIs that we are providing. So you know that with this Swagger, you can just check all the different services, and you can just find your parameters, the documentation. You can even text that from this web page, or you can use Postman or any other application in order to use this REST API, and even the auto-process SDK can be used for that. We have a small console in order to check some options from the platform. You can access a technical view of the contents of the platform. And you have also the CMIS endpoints. So Alfresco is supporting CMIS 1.1. I recommend you to use Atom or browser protocol with CMIS 1.1, and that will help you to use also the platform from external application. So okay, that was everything for Alfresco. Alfresco is up and running. You have all the services exposed, and you are now able to play with the platform. Alfresco platform provides different extension frameworks. The auto-process SDKs expose repository services via REST, events, and CMIS protocols. These kind of SDKs are used for integration from external applications, so you may choose your way according to your requirement. Since Alfresco Java SDK make easier to use REST API and events, any other software can be used for the integration. When using CMIS standard, Apache chemistry clients available in many different programming languages can be used. The in-process SDK, relying in Maven archetypes, allows to extend repository features by using internal Alfresco APIs. This kind of extension is packaged as jar libraries, and that may be added to Alfresco deployment as an additional library. Note that this step requires restarting the repository application. ADF, the Application Developer Framework, is an Angular components catalog to create your own UI or to extend the default Alfresco application ACA, the Alfresco content application that we saw in the previous deployment. The source code for every SDK is also available in Alfresco GitHub account. Since we learned how to deploy the platform with Docker Compose, now you're prepared to explore every extension and customization alternative. Enjoy the Alfresco experience, and let's move to the Nuxeo side. As we did with Alfresco, we are covering some aspects about the Nuxeo open source platform before moving on to the Docker Compose deployment. Nuxeo is licensed in a different way, since we have Apache 2.0 license instead of LGPL 3 used by Alfresco. And again, remember to check license conditions before modifying or distributing the original source code, despite this is a more permissive contract. Nuxeo provides some public resource to explore. All the source code is available in Nuxeo GitHub account, while Alfresco is keeping in private some enterprise repositories only for paying customers. Nuxeo source code is completely public. The Nuxeo public Maven repository for Java artifacts and deployments can be accessed in maven.nuxeo.org/nexus. And if you are looking for community support, you may use the Nuxeo forums. That is a questions and answers platform, and this page is available in answers.nuxeo.com. The official documentation available in doc.nuxeo.com includes detailed information related to many different topics in the platform. When looking at the Nuxeo platform, we found more or less the same services we described for Alfresco. The repository, including the core service of the platform that is connected to additional services like the transform service to provide document format transformations, the search service supporting the indexing and searching processes, and the messaging service that handles asynchronous messages in the platform. In the same way, the content is stored in a file storage. Remember that is a file system for the documents, and data storage that is a database for the metadata. Also, some UI applications delivering features for the users can be connected to that core repository. Note that on a typical deployment, a web reverse proxy is used as frontend to handle external requests to the different Nuxeo services. Following with the comparison, we note that also Nuxeo relies on many different open source products. The repository, also mainly built in Java, is deployed in Apache Tomcat. The transform service uses a bundle of different open source projects. LibreOffice and ImageMagick are providing transformation for Office documents and pictures. FFmpeg is used for video operations, and PDF to HTML supports the transformations to render the documents in the web UI. However, there are also additional integrations to transform content in Nuxeo, since this platform is more oriented to media repositories. In Nuxeo, search service is integrated with Elasticsearch, while we said Alfresco was using Apache Solr, but note that there is also an Elasticsearch integration in Alfresco, but this feature is still in early stages and only available for limited use cases. Nuxeo uses Apache Kafka for the messaging service. That is again a different approach from the active enqueue used by Alfresco. If we look at the database, we found an additional difference. Nuxeo supports NoSQL databases like MongoDB. Since Nuxeo can be also deployed using PostgreSQL or some other open source database, MongoDB is the most common deployment. Instead of using Angular, the stacks used by Alfresco, Nuxeo uses web components and Polymer for the UI application. And in the same way, there is a legacy UI based in JSF. The new UI is named Web UI, while the legacy one is named JSF UI. Finally, traffic proxy is used as default to provide reverse proxy services, but also Nginx or Apache HTTPD can be used. Once we review the Nuxeo stack, we are ready to deploy the product. So let's move on to it. So let's explore the different alternatives to install Nuxeo by using Docker Compose. In the same way, Nuxeo can be deployed by using some other methods we are going to review later, but we are going to focus on the Docker Compose deployment. So the first project we are going to review is this community contribute project that Nuxeo stacks that requires some evaluation license, that instance CLID file that you can get from Nuxeo support. You can get this license in order to evaluate the product, but if you don't want to follow that way, you can even build your own Nuxeo Docker image, just adding some customization and some services to your deployment, or you can use the public Nuxeo Docker image. That image is so simple to create, and this is the method we are going to use in this demonstration. And also remember that default credentials are administrator instead of admin for the use case of Nuxeo. So let's start with that demo, and we are going to start reviewing the different methods to deploy Nuxeo. In the official documentation, you can find detailed instructions on how to deploy using Docker images or deploying again using zip distribution files. So you can deploy Nuxeo on premise, and also there is a cluster deployment that with all the details also available in the documentation. But if we move to the Docker Compose deployment, then we can use this Nuxeo stacks project. Remember that you need that license for that, but this will provide us in a more similar, in a similar way that we were doing with the Alfresco installer. We are going to get some options so you can create all the different services and resources for the Docker Compose template. These are the dependencies. This is not based in Geoman, it's more relying on Ansible, but if you install the dependencies, then you can start using the project. Since again, I have all the dependencies installed on my computer, I can just start the installer. The first thing is to use that instance number, that license number. You can create an empty one if you don't want to use it. Then you need to choose the folder in order to create all that resources for the Docker Compose template. You can choose also the version you want to test. In our case, we are going to go with Nuxeo latest. And you can choose between the standalone instance or the clustering options. But since this is a demo, we can choose the standalone. Also for the database, you have different options like the NoSQL, MongoDB, or PostgreSQL. We are going with Mongo. That is the common option for Nuxeo. And you have a different number of services that you can use. So you can just choose Elastic, Redis, Kafka, Prometheus, and some different alternatives for the deployment, for the different services provided by Nuxeo. And with that, the script is starting to create all the different resources for the Docker Compose template. After that, on the folder we choose, we are going to find a similar Docker Compose template with all the resources required to deploy Alfresco. Sorry, not Alfresco. In this case, we are talking about Nuxeo locally. So we can see on that folder all the different resources, and again we can check that all the services are included on the Docker Compose file. So we have Zookeeper, Kafka, with also volumes to persist information. We have MongoDB with the volume, Elasticsearch for the search services with a connection to the web proxy, Nuxeo repository with some packages deployed like the Nuxeo Web UI and the platform importer. Also, we have some Redis and traffic as the web proxy exposing everything using the port 88. As I said before, we are not using this deployment because that requires that license for support. And if you want to just to text the product in an easy way, you can just use this simple Docker Compose that is getting the Docker image from the Docker Hub, from the public Docker registry. So let's start this one. We are deploying only the Nuxeo Web UI in order to have access to the UI application, so we can see again like the server is being deployed with the configuration we choose, and after a while we are going to have that ready. Okay, so while this is starting, remember that you may also want to use this this Docker file, that is the Docker file provided by Nuxeo, and you can include your own configuration in that, just building your Docker image, and you can use also your customized Docker image of Nuxeo in your deployment. But if that was deployed, we can access to the Nuxeo platform. Let's see if that started. We are up and running. So let's wait for it to start. You need to use localhost because it's the one that was declared in the web proxy. So just use localhost instead of the number. Remember that default password and username is administrator, and with that we can log in the UI application from Nuxeo. So again, you have all the UI with the different contents. You have all the options of the UI with all the services available and some administration from this point. And in this case, we have that API playground, that is the REST API. We don't have a Swagger, and we don't have a Swagger web page for it. But this is pretty simple. Also, just to explore the different REST API and just to find all the different services available on a node, and all the different requests you can perform in order to use this REST API. So with that, again, we have Nuxeo deploy, we have the UI, we have also the access to the API, and we are ready to explore the different deployment options, the different SDKs that are available in the product. Nuxeo platform provides different extension frameworks. As we review for Alfresco, we are going to make exactly the same review for the Nuxeo product. So REST API can be accessed from different technologies like JavaScript, Python, .NET, or PHP, but the most used is the Nuxeo Java client. Also note that any other HTTP client software can be used for this kind of integration. Consuming Nuxeo events is available using any of the existing Kafka clients that are available in Java, C, Go, .NET, and Python. When using CMIS standard, Apache Chemistry clients, also available in many different languages, can be used. Since the extension of the repository can be done also developing Nuxeo jar packages, the recommended approach is to use Nuxeo Studio tool. This tool provides a low-code, no-code approach experience for developers customizing the product. Nuxeo Studio tool can be used online, or you can download it to your local computer. When using the tool online, Nuxeo provides downloading services so you can deploy your modifications to any Nuxeo deployment by package name. Remember that this requires some registration in the Nuxeo support page. This is how we install the Nuxeo Web UI application in our previous Docker Compose deployment. So this is why this requires some registration in order to get access to that services. For the Web UI application, Nuxeo is providing a Polymer Elements catalog to create your own UI or to extend default Nuxeo application. Note that source code for every SDK is also available in Nuxeo GitHub account, but for Nuxeo Studio, that is a tool only available for registered users. We learned before how to deploy the platform with Docker Compose, so you are now ready to explore every extension and customization alternative. Have fun with Nuxeo. And as a final step in our presentation, we are going to review the future of open source in Hyland and that HXP, Hyland Experience platform, that is coming in the next year. HXP is still in development status, and some parts are even in design status. So this platform will be the new alternative for open source CSP with a cloud native design from Hyland. There is no fixed deadline yet, but we are expecting to release that like next year. This doesn't mean that Alfresco and Nuxeo are going to be removed from the market. They are still options. They are still being developed and supported. So this is just an addition for this market and for these open source alternatives in order to use that content service platform. In the meantime, we will be merging Alfresco, Nuxeo, and Hyland communities because we want to link all that people working in the same domain. They have the same problems, they have the same solutions. So we want just to have some communication just in order to get something better for everyone. We are going also to merge Alfresco, Nuxeo, and Hyland Marketplace so everyone can find the different add-ons, plugins, extensions, and so on the same place for every product. And we will be still engaging open source around all the Hyland products. So this is a strong commitment from Hyland in the open source alternative for the content service platforms, and we will be still delivering that vision in this year and for the next year. So that was everything. I hope that was useful, and now just ready for your question. Thanks and bye.